It's Rocky Mountain Sasquatch. The following Bigfoot sighting has always creeped me out and has intrigued me for many years. I first heard about it in 1998, and since then, there have been several other Bigfoot sightings at or near the location. Wheeler Canyon splits off Ogden Canyon just before you get to Pineview Reservoir, and the canyon ascends up to Snow Basin. My dad told me how something threw bowling ball-sized rocks at their camp and put a big dent in one of their trucks back when the canyon was open to vehicles. And he told me of weird vocalizations during that camp stay. I know of a hunting guide that crapped his pants when he was confronted by a large, growling Sasquatch up near the Trapper's Loop side above Snow Basin. One of the more recent sightings was when a motorist had to go around a Bigfoot walking in the center of Ogden Canyon Road at night during a January rainstorm just before you pass Wheeler Canyon. He thought it was a large man wearing a fur coat until he got close enough and had to swerve around it. And then he saw it was a giant two-legged creature covered in hair from head to toe. The Wheeler Canyon sighting that intrigues me the most is from a resident at the time that lived in a home at the mouth of Wheeler Canyon. 2 people living there had pretty scary encounters. Here is their report. It's a woman that submitted this report. I want to tell you about what happened a very long time ago, 1968. I was living up Ogden Canyon in a house in Wheeler Canyon, the second one to be exact. It was fall, and there were a lot of leaves on the ground. Very late one evening, I was sitting in the living room watching TV. My 2-year-old son was in the back bedroom asleep. The chair I was sitting in was angled with its back to the window. I got up to go to the kitchen to get a drink. When I turned around in the kitchen to walk back to the living room, I was shocked to see a pair of glowing red eyes staring at me from the window behind my chair through the window. The porch light was also shining through that window to the left, from my point of view, of the creature's head. All I could see of it was mainly a very dark mass outlined in the window, and the eyes, which were reflecting the light and seemed to glow red. I stood in the kitchen doorway frozen. I kept trying to tell myself I was seeing things, and it wasn't really there. After all, I did enjoy monster movies. Even though the show I was watching that night was a love story, I kept trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I finally turned and put my back against the wall inside the kitchen doorway and told myself that I'd clear my mind, and when I turned around again it would not be there. I waited long enough to compose myself and then turned back into the doorway to go into the living room. It didn't work. My visitor was still there. I want you to know that at that time in my life, I had never heard of a Bigfoot. The only thing in my mind that could look like that was a werewolf. And of course, everyone knows they are only in the movie Myth. I turned around again and walked back to the bedroom where my son was sleeping. I was very shaken, and the only thing I could think to do was call the police. I dialed the operator and asked for the police. But when they came on the line to talk to me, they said because I was up the canyon, I needed to talk to the sheriff. I finally got to talk to the sheriff's department, and I told them I had a prowler. I certainly couldn't say that I had a beast of some kind looking in my window. It took them about 30 to 45 minutes to show up at my house. While I waited, I sat in the dark and just listened. I expected to hear the thing crashing through the door or window at any time. I heard several of the windows along the east side of the house rattle softly, and also the back door, as if someone was just testing to be sure that they were secure. After that, there was nothing but silence, and I started to get some courage back before the sheriff showed up. By the time they got there, I was back to the living room and waiting for them. They asked for a description. I said I couldn't see the person because they were standing on the top step next to the porch light, and all I could see was the dark outline of their head and shoulders in the window. One of the deputies was about my husband's height, 6'3", and he stood on the top step window, framed only by his head. They commented that my prowler must have been fairly tall. There were no tracks to be found when I looked the next day, too many leaves. The porch doorway and steps at the time were built to go right along the house toward the driveway. Several years later, when I went back to look at the house, someone had changed the door and stairs to go away from the house and out toward the lawn. It made me wonder if someone else had the same visitor. My husband laughed at me at the time I told him about what had happened. I took my son and moved out about a week after that. My husband later told me that about a month or so after that he had a strange encounter early one morning. He was up getting ready for work when he heard a racket out in the porch. So he went out to chase our cats out and stop the noise. As he walked toward the door, he saw a dark, hairy face looking in at him through the little diamond-shaped window on the door. He stopped and thought, "Bear," and he ran into the front room to put on his pants and grab his gun. By the time he got back out, it was gone. It wasn't until later, when he was thinking about it, that he realized that it couldn't have been a bear because its face was up close to the window, and bear's snout would not fit close to the window like that. About a year after that, my husband moved to Eugene, Oregon with a friend to work, and he sent me a book on Bigfoot with a note that said, "I think you might like to read this. Remember your visitor?" Remember? I'll never forget. I still get the shakes when I think about it, and it's been a lot of years. One other note I'd like to mention. When we first moved to Wheeler Canyon, we did so with another couple, and they had 3 horses, which they kept in a corral down by the creek. More than once, when I was there alone in the evenings, I would hear the horses screaming. I'm not talking just their normal horse neigh or such. I'm talking screaming. I told Bob about it, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Either the mare is picking on one of the boys, or they can sense a wildcat up in the cliffs." After my visitor, I think what the horses could sense or smell was not a wildcat. I've told this story to a lot of friends and family, but never reported it to anyone involved in the study of tracking of Bigfoot before. I hope you find this of some interest. I don't know how long they keep police report records, especially such minor type reports, but maybe they keep them forever. I have no wish for any harm to come to any Bigfoot. Thinking back, I know that one I had the privilege to see meant me no harm. However, at the time, it scared the heck out of me. This is RMSO responding to the report. Appreciate you for reporting these events to the Bigfoot community. The part about the screaming horses reminds me of a nearby Bigfoot sighting in Huntsville on the other side of Pineview Reservoir from where you lived in Wheeler Canyon. A woman got a hold of me for help. Her horses were being terrorized by a Sasquatch. Her daughter saw the Bigfoot crawling like a soldier in combat between their home and the barnyard of animals. And one of the horses apparently was injured during one of the events. She wanted to know a way to drive this creature or creatures away from her property without upsetting them in fear of retaliation. From experience using trail cameras, we have witnessed where these creatures will change their travel route to a water source to avoid where these cameras are set. We believe these nocturnal creatures can see the infrared triggers on the camera and avoid them. So we told her to set up some around her property. If it didn't drive them away, at least she will have a 1 in a million photo or video of the creature. She agreed to set up some game cameras on her property, and we never heard from her again. More than likely, the IR triggers were enough to persuade the creatures to move on. Hope you enjoyed a look at this Bigfoot sighting area. Keep on watching. We're going to keep on squatching.